Hello dear viewers and welcome back to another episode of 4 Cents. My name is Amilcar and I am a sci-fi and dark fantasy author. The truth is that starting this video the right way is complicated because this is grown on so many levels. Long before I became an author, I already had a strong preference for respecting the original material. For example, I never liked watching dubbed movies and I still stand by that position today. I believe that the intention behind the original actor's voice, inflection and tones is an essential part of the work, something very different from what a dubbing actor can achieve. I'm not aware of any case where dubbing actors truly immerse themselves in the character the same way, and besides, the original actor received direct feedback from the director. Why am saying all this? Because just as I don't believe dubbing actors is better than the original, I also don't believe a screenwriter knows better than the author what's best for a character when they decide to change elements of the backstory. What's happening with Hollywood, and which fortunately is in decline thanks to massive backlash and billions of dollars lost on failed productions, can best be described as ignorance and narcissism. Ignorance because many adapters arbitrarily change character backstories without considering the repercussion this will have not only on the fandom but on the character itself, and narcissism because they think that they create something better than the author itself. Let's do a quick review of similar productions. Disney has historically been the king of race and gender swap. In the MCU, we have examples like the Ancient One in Doctor Strange, traditionally depicted as an old Asian man in the comics, but played by Tilda Swinton on the movies. Or Ghost Rider, who is a male character in the comics, but is played by Hannah John Kamen in the movie Ant-Man and the Wasp. There's also Hailey Bailey as Ariel in The Little Mermaid, Rachel Zegler in Snow White, and many more. This is nothing new for Hollywood, and most of the time these changes have led to failed productions. Other emblematic cases of race swap include Anne Boleyn, played by Judith Turner Smith, or Cleopatra by Adele James. The latter even prompted the Egyptian government itself to publicly express its repudiation of the casting choice. And I think there is a lawyer who is leading a suit against the production, if I'm not wrong. And if we talk about book adaptations, there is the case of Dune, where the character of Liet Kynes is literally described by Frank Herbert as a tall, thin man with long, sandy hair and sparse but mused mustache and a beard, and under heavy brows, eyes that were fathomless blue within blue. Yet in the movie, this character suffered not only race swap but also gender swap. I'm explaining all this because in the last 24 hours, HBO released the trailer for the new Harry Potter series on their YouTube channel. This adaptation already comes with a long list of stumbles, including statements from some actors regarding J.K. Rowling comments about the trans community. Additionally, the writer and showrunner Francesca Gardiner, along with director and executive producer Mark Millot, have insisted in several interviews that the series will have much more room to explore characters and situations that the book barely shows. This could be a good thing or a bad one. Both the trailer and the statement from Francesca and Mark talk about exploring more character and situation that the book barely shows. So, one has to ask, why does exploring more so often translate into inserting contemporary politics such as gay or trans relationships or modern racism into stories set in 90s England instead of diving deeper into what Rowling actually wrote but the previous movie cut? I'm not saying it will necessarily happen, but recent adaptation history is not on their side. I mean, after seeing what Francesca Gardiner did with HBO Watchmen series, where she introduced a lot of contemporary racial political content and contextualized characters, I'm sorry, but I'm choosing to prepare for the worst and expect the worst. For example, they could have used that extra space to fully develop the Marauder's backstory, the Prince's tale, or Snape's role in the Order of the Phoenix, and many other elements that are present in the books but were barely explored on screen. I mean, I have no problem with topics like gay relationship, trans issues, or racism as long as they are present with historical context appropriate to the time period in which the story takes place. When they are inserted without that connection, they feel forced, exactly as has been happening with DI agenda for the last, 15 or 20 years. Regarding the Harry Potter books, Rowling repeatedly described Snape as sallow, like sickly pale or yellowish skin, pale, with a large hooked nose and greasy black hair. These details are not accidental. Rowling used them to evoke a certain British Gothic Victorian archetype of a resentful outsider rather than a specific ethnic background. To be more precise, the book describes him as a thin man with sallow skin, a large hooked nose, and greasy shoulders, lank black hair which frames with face curtains. He had cold black eyes. The screenwriters act as if Rowling didn't know what she was doing with her characters, despite building a coherent world across 7 books and thousands of pages of details. She even drew Snape herself, and his appearance has been consistent from the very beginning. So, why change something that works and generates such an emotional dip just to impose a modern reading that adds unnecessary layers of racism where a well-defined system of discrimination already existed? Blood supremacy? The Harry Potter world is inspired by Victorian England but set in the 90s. During that period, the black population in Greater London was around 20% according to contemporary estimates, but it was much lower in suburban or industrial areas like those that inspired Spinner's End and Cogsworth, located in the Midlands, which is an industrial region in central northern England. The point is not that it was impossible, but it was statistically very unlikely for a character described with Snape's features to be black. His appearance fit perfectly within the visual canon of white British working class life. This character doesn't come across an innocent representation, but rather a deliberate decision that ignore the background Rowling carefully constructed. In the books, James Potter and his friends subjected Severus Snape to real bullying, and I am talking the kind of bullying that existed in the 80s and 90s. I mean real bullying, not what is considered bullying today. So, it is precisely because of that trauma that the Snapes project all those emotions onto Harry. His hatred is so gratuitous. It is a combination of trauma projection from bullying, unrequited love for Lily, and guilt over his role in her death. So, Snape bullies Harry because he himself was bullied by Harry's father, and he said it directly with lines like, "You are just like your father, arrogant and self-satisfied," or "I see no difference," referring to seeing the father in Harry, or my favorite, "Your father was as lazy and arrogant as you are." And this is the big question. Are they really going to go so far as to show a black professor bullying an innocent child, in this case an innocent white child, just simply because of something his father did? Another important detail, and a clear example that the screenwriters are deforming the character out of sheer arrogance and ignorance, is his look. In the adaptation, he wears dreadlocks, something that would strongly clash with the historical context of the 90s England. The Brixton riots were still fresh in the collective memory of the British black community, and at that time that community was largely trying to integrate rather than emphasize such a striking visual difference. Therefore, dreadlocks would have been almost unthinkable in that environment. The worst part is that they didn't just turn an iconic white character into a black one. They give him the most stereotypically black look possible, and I say black in quotes because the writer seems so racist in the worldview that they believe people of color cannot have a neutral or sober appearance. No. They must wear a crown of cultural identity and a layer of black history. It's ridiculous. Once again, this is not adapting the character, it's a transvestism of the character. The changes are being forced onto him, not the original character. And this is one of the problems. This doesn't just hurt immersion, it forces the screenwriters to rewrite key scenes so they can make sense in the new context, of course. Or there is another option, to leave them unchanged and create serious inconsistencies. On top of everything else, this racial change introduces problems that didn't exist in the original story. By turning James Potter bullying of Snape into something that could be interpreted as racial motivated, the entire conflict is distorted. In the books, the reason for the bullying were childish rivalry, jealousy, competition, and the need to prove superiority, especially because both were in love with the same woman, Lily, who would later become Harry's mother. If James now appears as a racial bully toward a black Snape, it radically changed the perception of James from arrogant rival to racist. Or Lily, why would she fall in love with someone like that? And of Snape himself, his redemption arc loses nuances because it now stems from a different kind of victimhood. I say this type of racism is unnecessary because the novel already had a very clear element of discrimination. As I said before, blood supremacy from pure-blood wizards toward half-bloods and muggleborns. Adding an extra layer of modern real-world racism is unjustified and unnecessarily complicate the story. That's the truth. Unfortunately, from what little we have seen in the trailer, there are already clear signs that the screenwriters don't know what they are doing. Not only with Snape's, but also with the look of other characters. For example, Draco Malfoy. In the books, he is described as having very pale blonde hair, straight, neat and well groomed, which reinforced his elitist background and the rigidity of his family. In the new adaptation, however, they show him with messier, less perfect hair, making him look more youthful and natural, but far less rigid and elitist. This detail matters because the original description visually supports the Malfoy family's supremacy worldview, a sense of superiority reflected even in their appearances. In conclusion, this is exactly what is wrong with Hollywood screenwriters. Again, they have no idea what they're doing. They aren't even capable of researching the political and social context of the time period in which the story is set. Given everything mentioned above, this adaptation will be no exception. At least, that's what I think. Therefore, I can only offer my sincerest condolences to the fans of this franchise. And that's all for this video. If you like it, please give it a like, share and subscribe so you stay tuned for the next one. If you have any comments or critiques, your opinion is important to us, so I'll read you on the comments. See you next time and thanks for your time. Bye bye.